Hi there. Today I'm going to be playing Kerbal Space Program. Kerbal Space Program has been around for a little while. This is actually quite a number of versions after I first started playing the game, and over the development period they've really improved the game an enormous amount to the point where it's incredibly complete at this point. Unfortunately, I've never actually landed on the Mun. I've got pretty close. I've managed to crash into it a few times, but I've never actually landed on it. So over the course of this series, I'm going to actually attempt to try and land on the Mun with a relatively predictable, with a relatively well-known approach. So I'm going to try and follow essentially the US space race approach, Mercury, Gemini, Apollo, and see whether or not we can actually get to the Mun and land the same way that the US did. So we're going to start a new game. I'm just going to call it YouTube, because that's probably going to be the easiest thing to call it. So I'm not really going to go too much into how to play the game. I'm just going to play it. Part of the reason why is that if you really want to understand how to play the game, there's plenty of good YouTube series on how to do that. So for Mercury, we're just going to use the generic one crew command pod, and we're going to do the most important thing of all to begin with, which is actually attach some parachutes to it, because without parachutes it's not going to go, it's not going to be a great landing experience. The other thing we're going to do is put a docking ring on it. That looks like a pretty good docking ring. And then attach some grunt to it. So we need some propulsion. That's a bit big. That's actually the kind of tank that we want. So we're going to put a few of those on. As I say, this is Mercury. The whole objective of Mercury was just to get into orbit. So we'll use... Have we got the... no, I'm looking for a particular rocket engine. That one, I think. Yeah. So that one's got thrust vectoring on it, I'm pretty sure. Yeah, it's got thrust vectoring, and that one doesn't. So we want one with thrust vectoring, because otherwise we're not going to have a lot of luck controlling this. And we need some wings. Where's a decent wing? Tail fin? No. There's the thing that we want. So we want some wings. And we'll put them in... put 4 of them on the bottom. That will give us a bit more control. We actually don't have a SAS on this, so we're pretty much just using those wings for stability. We should really put a SAS on this. If you haven't already, you kind of should have a SAS module just to give it some more stability. So we've attached one of those. Alright, let's call this Mercury 1. Mercury 1. And we'll save that, and let's see whether or not we can actually manage to establish a stable orbit. I haven't put any RCS thrusters on it because I don't think we really need them for this particular stage. We're just going to do a shot straight up to orbit, see how we go. So we're going to set thruster max, and we're going to turn on and lock the SAS, because that'll make things much easier, and off we go. So this is a really slow launch. We've got a lot of fuel. As you can see, we've got a huge amount of fuel, but as we begin to burn off that fuel, it should get a little bit faster. So we're managing to actually get some decent, it's getting there in terms of speed. It's not absolutely fantastic at the moment, but it is getting there. When we get to about 15,000 meters, somewhere between 15,000 and 20,000 meters, we're going to want to pitch over and start to attempt to actually get ourselves into a relatively good position for entering orbit. We've got nearly half of our fuel consumed. Yeah, we've already used nearly half of our fuel, but we're really starting to move quite quickly now. We're already up to 160 meters per second, so we're going pretty quickly now. Say our pitch over point is going to be fairly close to 15,000, somewhere between 15,000 and 20,000 meters. We're still well inside the atmosphere. You can see the atmosphere badge there, a gauge there. So we're still quite inside the atmosphere at this point. We're continuing to accelerate quite strongly now. So we've got less than half of our fuel left, but we're not far away from our pitch over point. So we're going to start pitching over now and try and get us fairly close to an orbit. Probably not going to make this orbit, to be honest. I think it'll be pretty lucky if we actually do manage to make this orbit at all. We're nearly up to 1,000 meters per second. Oh, we are actually possibly going to make orbit. 40,000. The atmosphere thins out at about 66,000 meters. So we've got a reasonable possibility of actually making this. We need to hit a orbital velocity of about 22,000. So we actually may make orbit. Let's see. Well, we've actually hit a reasonable orbital speed. We're still going up. Well, actually, we've managed to make a reasonable height. We're about 8 minutes away from our peak. So, well, we're not going to manage to stay in orbit with that, but we've managed to get a decent amount of height. Surprisingly, even though we've exhausted almost all of our fuel, we will probably manage to make it back to ground okay. So that wasn't too bad for a first launch with a craft that was just sort of bashed together pretty quickly. As you can see, we're going to make a fairly high altitude, going to get some nice views of Kerbal below us. Given the fuel situation, we can probably just eject the rest of our craft and accept that this is, the way we're going to be. So, goodbye rest of the craft. Yeah, with the craft in this control mode, it's actually a little bit hard to control it. So there's our craft. It's got our one guy in it. It'll probably do okay, so... As you can see, we're going to be tracking fairly high up into the atmosphere. Oh, we're dipping back down now, and we're going to be going into the dark side. Let's turn off time warp. That's our debris from that's our first stage, or our only stage, I guess. We've still got a wee ways to go before we're going to splash down, so why don't we actually just fast forward through some of this. Now at the moment there's no re-entry heat, which is really good because I haven't put a heat shield on. We're going to land in the dark, which is not so cool. So now we're in the atmosphere. We're going to need to sit back and wait, actually. There's nothing we can do at this point. Eventually when we get low enough we'll want to pop our chutes. We should have a nice gentle landing. But for now, it's way too high to actually open our chutes. The chutes stop dragging around 4,000 meters, and they open fully at about 400 meters, I think. So we can just let this slow down naturally in the atmosphere. The atmosphere is thick enough that you can actually get away with just waiting quite late before you're actually bothering to open your chutes. As you can see from the surface speed, we're slowing down incredibly rapidly with the thickness of the atmosphere. So I'm going to go for chute opening. So as you can see, the chutes haven't fully opened out yet, but it won't be too much longer before they do. Surface speed needs to be under about 12 meters per second for a clean landing. If it's much faster than that, you'll just crash into the terrain and kill people. Kill your poor Kerbals. Our chute still hasn't fully opened up, but doesn't fully open up until really low, I guess. There we are. So the chute's fully open. It's only 6 meters per second that we're dropping down, and it's a bit unfortunate we're on the night side because this isn't terribly interesting. There's a lot of black. Can we see the mun from here? No, mun must be on the... Oh, there it is. There's the mun. That's our target. That's what we're trying to aim for. One day, one episode, we'll finally get there. But not this episode. So, a little bit further to go, and then we will be on the ground. And we will have actually managed to get ourselves into, not orbit, but at least we got ourselves a decent velocity at the point where we shut off our engines. We actually should have shut off our engines a little bit earlier, or pitched over a little bit earlier, I think. We only need to get to an orbital distance of about 100 kilometers. 300 kilometers where we went to was way further than we really needed to get to. So we actually know that we've got far more energy than we really need. And there we are, we're on the ground. So our Kerbal actually survived. That's kind of good. So we'll just end this flight. No damage, that's pretty good. Our entire flight was 24 minutes of game time. And 11G. 11G must have been re-entry. Pretty sure 11G was re-entry. So we didn't do too badly. So Mercury 1 got us a pop gun. It didn't really get us into a position where we were going to orbit pretty reliably. There's several things that we can do to this craft. The first thing we need to actually start thinking about is RCS. We don't have an RCS tank. We should probably have one. If I can find the RCS tanks. Is that a little RCS tank? Good, okay. We'll attach some RCS thrusters to the craft. Actually, what we want to do is put decoupler. No, that's not a decoupler. Under this, so we can just jettison. Well, actually, no, we don't need to do that. Let's just put the RCS blocks straight on the RCS tank. RCS blocks, and we'll put 4 of them in. So this is going to be very hard to control because it's going to be, actually we really want it in the center, center of mass. So let's put it right on the center of mass. It'll make it much easier to control. Center of lift, center of thrust, yeah, that's all good. Center of mass, that's good. So we've got our RCS blocks right on the center of mass. Thankfully with RCS blocks you can just park them down anywhere, which is quite neat. Alright, we can turn that off. So the objective this time is going to be to try and get into a stable 100 km/h orbit. That's potentially going to be really difficult, but you know, let's see how it works out. So this is going to be Mercury 2. We're going to see whether or not this time we can get into a nice stable orbit and have enough fuel for a re-entry burn. Actually, what I should do is attach some retros. Do we have any retros? There are some tiny liquid engine. No, that requires propellant. No, that's a solid. There was somewhere I thought a set of retros that you could use, but maybe I'm mistaken. Linear RCS ports, no. That must be from one of the mods. These engines are really neat, but they require fuel, which is not really terribly useful for doing a burn if you've actually managed to run all your fuel out. Okay, let's not care about retros then, and let's just try and put this in orbit. So this is going to be more or less the same thing. We're going to pitch over now a lot earlier. I think this time we're going to pitch over at about 12,000 meters, because we were more than capable of hitting a really high altitude with the rocket setup we've got. So let's just get this up and try and get it into orbit. So again, this is a pretty slow launch, but it does get a lot quicker. This time, as I say, we're going to try and have a reasonable amount of fuel left in order to get into a parking orbit. Hopefully we'll have enough fuel left that we have some left to get out of that parking orbit, because otherwise this isn't going to, this is going to be kind of embarrassing. Poor Jebediah Kerman will be stuck in orbit, which will be a bit sad. So we'll just let it climb until about 10,000 meters, and then we're just going to pitch over and try and actually get orbit. Would be nice. I'm not sure Mercury 2 will get into orbit. It's probably a little bit optimistic, but we know at least the craft has the necessary fuel and thrust to get into a reasonably high point above the surface. What was that? Was that us breaking the sound barrier, maybe? I don't know. I've never heard that noise. Hopefully it wasn't something exploding. Because that would be kind of bad. Now you'll notice that each time I'm pitching over to 90 degrees, there is a reason why I'm pitching over to 90. This is 90 on our nav ball. 90 happens to be the flat plane orbit of the Mun. So if you pitch over to 90, then you'll always end up in roughly the same orbital plane as the Mun. So we're going to start pitching over now. We're going to pitch over to 45 degrees. And leave it right there. So again, we're probably not actually going to have enough fuel to do this. I think it's going to be pretty optimistic. In fact, we seem to be falling very slightly. You can see that our direction of travel is not the same as where we're pointing. So we do seem to be pitched over. Well, we're falling a lot more than we possibly should. Well, it might be okay. The biggest challenge now is going to be the fact that we are going to run out of fuel well before we manage to make it out of the atmosphere. We have not got a lot of fuel left. Let's try and we're not going to manage to get a high enough altitude to make this work. Let's try and save some fuel. Where are we going to end up? Well, 230 kilometers. Oh, actually, we pitched over way too late. And we didn't shut down our engines early enough. Okay, so actually we haven't done so badly. How's our... You can see the orbit is pretty flat compared to the Mun. That circle is the Mun orbit. So we haven't done too badly. We're 5 minutes away from our peak. I think we can possibly... It's not our pitch over speed that's now the problem. It's when we're doing... Well, no, sorry. When we're doing pitch over seems okay. But we're spending a lot of fuel to get to that point. We probably don't need to spend anywhere near as much fuel. Because we only need to get to a point that's about 100 kilometers up. So we're spending too much time going vertical and not enough time pitching over. So we can probably actually cut that stage much earlier than that. In which case, yeah. So we're going to play around with RCS while we're up here. I mean, that's definitely a much better attempt. 230 kilometers is much better than 330. Completely out of fuel though. And we'll turn off the SAS and we'll turn on the RCS. So the RCS allows us... You'll see that, if you look very closely, you'll see that there is propellant coming out of here. And we can spin. The RCS can also be used by the SAS system to adjust the heading and keep us aligned to something, which is useful. So it looks like we're not going to make orbit. 230 kilometers, that's a lot better than our first attempt. We're just going to fast forward through all of this because we already know that we're not going to make it. In fact, I'm just going to get rid of that chunk and land. You'll see we've also got Mercury 2 debris. We don't have any Mercury 1 debris because we haven't got anything in orbit that's staying there. So, you know, with that launch angle was pretty good. Where's the Mun? Where is the Mun? Oh, there we are. Still no closer on this launch, but hey, that's the way things go. there does seem to be some attempt to add re-entry heat in, well, it probably won't be 019, it will probably be 020. I'm not looking forward to re-entry heat because my re-entries tend to be pretty ignorant of re-entry heat at the moment. But you know, it'll be something interesting to deal with when it finally comes through. So that's kind of, that's a couple of launch attempts. We've at least gotten our guys back. We're not hitting that 100-kilometer orbit point at all yet, which is a little bit of a pain. We really want to optimize our fuel usage so that we can get to that 100-kilometer-an-hour point and still have enough fuel left to circularize our orbit. And at the moment we're probably not really going to manage to do that terribly well, but oh well, we'll see. So anyway, look forward to episode 2, where I at least try and make some attempt to get into orbit, and we'll see how that goes.